What's shaking, cocktail fans? I'm Modern Bar Cart CEO Eric Kozlik, and this time around I have a special panel interview that was filmed at the 2020 American Distilling Institute Annual Judging of Craft Spirits. 4 spirits experts gather around a table to discuss ready-to-drink or RTD cocktails, which have been taking the world by storm. We sample a number of these canned drinks and talk about where this trend comes from and what to expect in 2020. Check it out. Delegates from the United Kingdom and Keli Rivers, welcome to the podcast. Could you just go around, maybe starting with my friend Bernadette, and introduce yourselves for our listeners?
Hi, I'm Bernadette Pamplin. I write under the Ginfluence. I've been blogging for about 5 years. I'm now doing spirits writing for magazines. I judge, and I also help with events.
It's David T. Smith. I'm a writer specialising in spirits, but particularly gin and cocktails and anything a little bit weird that no one else wants to write about.
Right. The Gin Dictionary. Listeners may have heard David's interview on the podcast. We'll link to that in the show notes page over at modernbarcart.com, so you can check out that interview after this one.
I'm Joe Barber. I'm a RTD connoisseur, I like to think. And I also help out with the ADI and the Craft Distilling Expo.
Yeah, this is Keli Rivers. I have been a gin educator here in the U.S. For about 12 years. I helped open up Whitechapel in San Francisco, so the largest gin bar in the U.S. as their gin som, so to speak. And I am currently living in New York and work with Sipsmith Gin over there and teaching people about gin in general while drinking RTDs.
And you successfully put up with me for a full day on a panel.
I mean, I think it was a mutual kind of a back and forth. Yeah, I think we each brought our own nuances to the tasting notes here.
Yeah. So we've got a bunch of gin experts. We have a self-declared RTD connoisseur. Before recording,
self-proclaimed.
Before recording, we kind of identified Joe as our man on the street. What I want to do is start with a basic overview of this category, because anybody who has eyes in the United States and abroad has probably noticed that there's been an explosion of different alcoholic cocktail approximations that are bottled or canned for consumption, and that's been a big trend, probably one of the biggest trends in the spirits and cocktail industry in the past couple of years. So we wanted to bring a little bit more awareness to this category, and we wanted to just give people a sense of what's going on, because we've got a lot of marks that were submitted here for evaluation. So, David, can you just give us a high-level overview, and anybody else can feel free to jump in with their thoughts?
Yeah, okay. So I guess when I think about RTDs and bottled cocktails, there are these 2 main different types. One is the sort of a spirit and mixer. Could be like a gin and tonic is a very good example. Rum and Coke, Jack Daniels and Coke, that whiskey Coke, that kind of thing, often designed to be sort of on the go. And then the slightly more sort of older and more sort of historical style with these ideas of bottled cocktails. So they could be things like Manhattans or Martinis, and lots of the big distilleries were making them sort of back in the sort of 20s, 30s, that sort of time. They were designed to kind of be preserved over ice, so you still had a little bit of work, whereas mostly what we're talking about today is RTDs, and that's kind of on the go. Think, commuter on his way home, well, at least in the UK, having a little drink after a stressful day, or barbecue, picnic, beach, that sort of thing.
Right.
Never while you're operating a machine. These are not what these
Heavy
are designed.
Not during work.
No.
What if you get nervous, operating a machine?
We do not condone drinking and driving, or drinking and operating machinery, or drinking anything that is condoned as illegal. Yeah, that's...
You can tell that Keli is the one who's most concerned about job safety right now.
Sip responsibly.
So, yeah, that's kind of interesting, David. Thinking about the rum, the ands, right? The rum and Coke, the whiskey and Coke. To me, when I think of that, I think of the shift that occurred from the early 20th century to the mid 20th century, at least in the United States, because of Prohibition. After Prohibition ended, what was considered a highball kind of changed. We started getting more of these sodas, more of these sweetened and carbonated mixers toward the latter half of the 20th century. And so during that time, a highball was kind of a rum and coke or a whiskey coke, whereas previous to that, it was just sort of the classic what we're now getting back to in the highball category. Sure, yeah. And then we also have this other classification that's kind of front and center here, this long drink, which is something that I learned about for the first time this year. Does anybody have a good approximation of what the long drink is as a category?
Well, the long drink itself is a very Finnish and Swedish kind of an origin, where it is citrus juice is now starting to become involved, and it's usually a carbonated or not carbonated.
Usually carbonated.
Usually
yeah.
carbonated. I've seen a few that were not, and they were supposed to be served warm, which was fun. The actual dispensary had warm beverages in there, but it's kind of where you have the +1 is what I call them. The gin and tonics, the vodka sodas, the rum and cokes. I call it a +1, something and one. Long drink would have multiple. Would be in the +2, +3, but not into the cocktail. So one of the things that we can say when we're talking about beverages in cans or tins or bottles, the history kind of started off with here in Connecticut with the Le Club, and it was a full cocktail and a drink, and it was to help people that didn't want to mix still be able to enjoy it. And then from there, it kind of went into, most notably, would be the Gordon's.
Yep.
The Gordon's drinks, which were also in little bottles, very much like the spirit that it was, because this is the first time we're naming the actual brand of the alcohol and what their influences are.
It's probably worth noting that the bottles for these, and they did at least a dozen different varieties, the Gordon's, and the bottles look very much like the Tanqueray bottle today, which is not a Victorian fire hydrant. It's meant to look like a cocktail shaker, and that's where that's come from.
Yeah.
Right. Oh, that's a good point. Cool. Bernadette, you've been quiet. What do you think about some of the RTDs that we're seeing on the market today? You were mentioning that you did a little bit of writing on that subject.
I did. I should have reread that. Quick reminder. Oh, sorry. Okay. I love the convenience of RTDs. At home, everybody's just mad for them, for the convenience. And unfortunately, like most things, people aren't always too caring about the quality. You can buy a lot of very cheap. We've got a supermarket, Lidl's, they sell like 99p gin tonics in a can, and people do go through quite a lot of them. My weird problem with RTDs, and I totally understand why it is how it is I just find you get a lot of them, and they're kind of like a 5% ABV, and it just doesn't quite sit right with me, because I kind of feel like if you could buy a can of beer that's 5%, if I'm buying a can that's like a cocktail, I want it to be slightly more, only very slightly. I realise there's issues with that with like price pointing, and I understand here as well there's issues with sort of staggered taxes that you pay based on ABV, so it kind of puts people off. But if it's a sort of a low ABV one, I'm not too interested in them.
Yeah, it is interesting because, if you do the math, Keli and David, I'm sure you've done the math for cocktail ABV.
I do the maths, but there you go.
I try very lightly to do math. The less math I can do, the happier I am. Yeah.
But generally speaking, some of the, like if you were to get a gin and tonic, where would that be in an ABV range at a bar or in the home if you were making a standard size gin and tonic?
That's a question.
It's about, 8%, something like that? 8-9%, I think, for a standard one. Depends on the ratio, for sure.
You also have to understand that in the UK, the standard pour of a gin and tonic is about 30 milliliters, which is just a little bit over an ounce. So I always say when anyone comes over from the UK and they're coming to drink in the United States, it's a little bit more alcohol we got in our drink, especially in a gin and tonic. When you go over to the UK, they'll ask if you want a single or a double. Here in the US, if you say you want a double, that's about 4 ounces of alcohol that you're getting in the drink. So,
right.
So those are things to note.
So generally, though, like if I were to do a 2-ounce pour,
2-ounce pour in the U.S. with a tonic of a normal size of a double rocks glass over ice, you're roughly going anywhere between 10 and 14% alcohol in a glass.
Right.
An 8-ounce glass.
right? So roughly comparable in that case to like a glass of wine, which is why in the U.S. like a lot of like when you get certified for bartending, you've got, you're kind of comparing a full pint of beer to a glass of wine to a rocks glass of a cocktail, for example. So yeah, we do get a range of ABVs, we get a range of flavors. Why don't we talk about what you just poured, David, and maybe give us a little evaluation of the flavor profile that we've got in this.
Yeah, so this is one of these Finnish long drinks. This is a cranberry flavoured one. So you've got the gin and that there, but then it's a very nice red colour, which you can't see on a podcast, but we can all see it here.
Is it more pink? I would say pink.
Rose, maybe.
Scarlet.
Rose.
We'll give rose. But I think ask the man on the street what he thinks.
Joe, let's hear it, Joe.
What do I think of the long drink?
Or that long drink.
He's tasting intently.
I think it's quite nice. I think it's quite balanced. It's nice. You get the gin, you get some cranberry. It's really refreshing. And it's, you want to serve it cold. But I think as a drink, if I was sat out in the sun, like we've got quite a lot of sun where we are now, I think I could happily sit and drink 4 or 5 of these quite happily.
Sure, for sure.
I think that's kind of one of the real key things. And I guess probably worth saying that 3 of us are drinking these out of cups, but the man on the street's got a can, because really, for something like an RTD, you need to be able to drink it, if you're out and about or something like that. I think the cranberry, the finish is really nice and clean, and that's one of the things that I think
this is
add something to
one
it.
of my first long drinks with the cranberry. I didn't think I was going to like it as much as I did. I quite like it. It's 5.5% alcohol, which, again, for a long drink is standard, and I don't know if I want any more. I know, Bernie, you like to have a little bit more oomph.
I do like a bit of poke.
But I think for what it is, crushing it outside on the patio by the water, maybe on your friend's boat, you're not driving. I call it porch drinking. It's just easy. I mean, my great aunt used to say, life's difficult, drinking shouldn't have to be. And I think that's what these are. That's what RTDs really represent. When I talk about it, because I love them and I love to champion them, I try to get everyone to think about it as, yes, maybe you can make a better drink, but that's not the purpose of this.
Yes.
It's quite nice as well having a different variety of flavours, especially in the UK. We're finding you'll agree, David, there's a lot more RTDs coming to market, and we got our alcohol sections in our supermarkets have got large sections for RTDs now, which is fantastic for the consumer, for people wanting to try it. And I think it's good that a lot of the bigger brands are jumping on board as well, and some of the craft brands are doing it. So there's a real variety for people to play with and find what they like.
I think in terms of like the place where the RTD kind of fits, is often a place where you might have like a can of beer, and not everyone likes beer, so instead of having beer, and you necessarily want wine, you have something like this instead. You can chuck a load of different ones with your beer in a cooler, and I think that's kind of the place where it fits. I guess that's probably why the ABVs are around that kind of beer ABV as well.
Well, I think what's really interesting, especially here in the United States, because I think in the US, our RTDs that we really think about are like buzzballs.
I had one of those.
Oh, I'm
for
so
the first
sorry.
time,
Please do not judge the U.S. on buzzballs.
It's
really,
like apple sours. It's like forbidden
But then,
apple.
or you would go into like your corner liquor store, and there'd be like the little cans of like Mai Tais or Long Island iced teas. And so I think that's how I first saw the RTD, or the ready to drink. But when you're seeing, especially in the last 2 years in the U.S., the flight of spiked seltzers. Regionally, a lot of that was marketed towards the health conscious. They were marketed towards the vodka soda drinkers. And what they found very quickly that blew the marketer's mind was that the 40-plus-year-old Caucasian, middle class, upper class were drinking most of them during like sporting events. They were having them as their tailgating drinks. This is a market that they didn't even think that they could even jump into, and these are the champions. I live in Brooklyn, and in Williamsburg, so many of the liquor stores have like the Trulies, the Spike Seltzers, the White Claws, and it's just like the beer market is like, or the can market is so much lower because it's just cases and stacks on these, and people go crazy about it.
Yeah. Yeah. And as we were discussing this, you know, I started thinking about some of the RTDs that we judged. The way that we do it here at ADI is that a lot of different a lot of different tables get to kind of throw their hats into the ring and help out with judging the RTDs. There's not a dedicated RTD table where that's all they judge, which I think is a good thing because it allows us to all kind of figure out where this category is going. It allows us to all have a little bit more input on it. But there were a couple occasions where I came across some RTDs and it was a little tricky to judge them because I wasn't quite sure, especially when that RTD was billed as a cocktail, if I was judging it as an RTD or if I was judging it against what that cocktail should be. Can you talk about any of that and maybe how a consumer should think about what is a successful RTD rather than maybe a less successful RTD?
Well, coming back to your point, where you have to judge it not something that you've made, and it's something just slightly less than that. I tend to look at like the balance of what's coming through. Does it taste like the thing it's meant to be? It doesn't have to be the best version of that, but does it taste like it? Also, just like the quality of the production, the different things you get coming through. And that's what I tend to look at when I judge it.
Keli, you have a very particular thing that you look for.
That is probably the nicest way anyone has ever said that. Thank you. I appreciate it. So yeah, when I judge RTDs or when I take, even at home or when I travel abroad, because one of my favorite things to do when I travel is to go to the grocery store, go to the market and find out what RTDs they have and bring them at home. The bottom shelf of my fridge is all RTDs, just like the whole thing. No vegetables in there, Mom. But so what I judge for looking for it is it what it's supposed to be, right? Does it have the elements? Is it the best element? No, probably not. Can my mother make a better one? Yeah, my mom probably can. But it's more the fact that, do I like it? Mm-hmm. Ultimately, that's the end of it. Do I like it? Am I going to nitpick that maybe the citrus in my gin and tonic has a little bit of a Sprite or 7-Up flavor? No, because did I finish it? Yeah. Did I want to get the other one? Of course I do. And that is what I think a successful RTD is.
Mm-hmm. And now, what are your thoughts on carbonation?
Oh, I have yeah. So when it comes to carbonation, if the drink is supposed to be carbonated, I want the bubble to be there, especially in a can, especially in an 8-ounce can. One of the things, I know Smith here opened up our next RTD for us to taste and sample. This is, I find, to be probably the most perfect size of an RTD. It is what? 200 milliliters. I think it fits good in the hand, especially for a carbonated. The carbonation will stay. And especially when we're talking about the gin and tonic, which I think is probably the most done RTD out there because it's a little bit more interesting than, let's say, a vodka soda. I'm just saying. I think that's why the spike seltzer is over here. But all I'm saying is, you want that carbonation to stay. You want those notes to hit it. You want it lighter in the palate. I know a few people have some issues with a can of that's flat, or if the drink's supposed to be flat, but it still comes out of a can because that mind that says, oh, can, that noise, it's supposed to be carbonated and then it's not, and then you're disappointed. But I'm okay with that. Mm-hmm. But if there is carbonation, let's make sure that carbonation stays.
Mm-hmm. It's funny. I think sometimes consumers or listeners who are just kind of casual at-home bartenders who are listening to this podcast probably think of spirits judging events like a bunch of people in very nice suits sitting around a table, maybe some monocles and pocket watches. David and we're all just kind of sitting here like very, evaluating these things in a very kind of snobby way. But I really like what you were saying, Keli, about the carbonation, because we actually kind of do go through and evaluate these drinks in a kind of stepwise methodical way. We're looking at the different components. And I think a great example of that is yesterday, I had the opportunity to judge an RTD that was billed as a bee's knees cocktail. And I think it was the least successful cocktail on that flight. And we had really, really tight consensus around the entire table because all of us said, all right, this is supposed to be a bee's knees. Bee's knees has gin. It's got honey. It's got lemon. I don't taste the gin. I don't taste the honey. And the lemon tastes like sweet tarts in this. Poor score. And the carbonation was a little bit weak. So, we do go through it in a stepwise manner. And I think I was skeptical about us judging an RTD category because it seemed very far away from the kind of craft origins of ADI. But I think because we're trained to do this in a very methodical, very carefully considered manner, I think it's actually really valuable to the RTD community.
Yeah, and as you were saying, there's quite a lot of smaller producers are making them as well. Just the one that we're drinking at the moment is a little bit of a sideways move because this is actually a canned martini. This is 21%, so much higher. This is in the 200 ml. What did people think?
I mean, I want to know what the proportions of vermouth to gin is on. No, sorry, that's just me being a neurotic. It says here it's Le Club, which was the brand. They did a nice repackaging and rebranding of the can, I've noticed, because this was the brand that I noticed when I was going to liquor stores next to the Buzzballs was Le Club brand. But it says made with extra dry gin and vermouth. The gin is in it. Is also what it says in the flavor text. And other fine spirits. Yeah, I mean, it's not awful.
It's perfectly drinkable, I would say.
It's quite nice.
And cold.
I don't know if I'd be crushing I would normally not be crushing martinis on the side of the pool anyway. But I guess now I can in a perfectly.
I don't think I'd have lots of these if I'm out having a bit of a good time. There's not going to be. It's quite strong. It's quite powerful. I'm not going to be, like you say, crushing a lot of them. Bernie looks like she's going to be crushing a lot of them.
I like it. And the can's so small, you could fit so many in your cool box.
I can put so many of these in my purse. It's going to be great. We also do not condone bringing your own RTDs in any establishment. That would be wrong.
Kelly's going to be my new disclaimer person.
The voice of reason. I could see something like this working quite well on a plane. Should you want to have a gin martini on a plane, it's a bit difficult to get the mixing glass out.
I think that'd be really interesting. What we're starting to see on planes and in flights, I think probably in the US, the biggest one would be a company called On the Rocks.
Yep.
They are out of, I think, Chicago. I'm not 100% sure. I usually see them around there. But what they did was they actually partnered up with Beam Suntory, and they created a Knob Creek Old Fashioned, Hilarious Aviation, a Cruisin' Mai Tai. And you can, I've seen them in a few hotels. Instead of having the minibar, they're already there. But I know that United does the Manhattan or the Old Fashioned. Mm-hmm. And you can buy that as a cocktail. And I can see this taking off or doing something on a plane.
Taking off.
Man, if only I meant that one.
Actually, when I travelled relatively recently, that was one of the things I was really excited about trying was this cocktail on the plane. And I was like, I could have had whiskey, but actually I'd rather have this. And it was just nice sipping on it for my 45-minute flight or whatever it was.
But what we were talking about when you're talking about craft and how RTD maybe to you didn't fit with a craft, I know from working on a smaller craft brand in a very large corporation like Beam Suntory, what Sipsmith did when we made our RTD, which is unfortunately only available in the UK,
but somehow it was magically transported here.
I don't know how that happened, not at all. But so one of the things that I'm trying to, or I try to talk to our development team, because we do have an RTD development team in the United States for Beam Suntory, is the fact that, yes, maybe Sipsmith is not as well known here in the U.S. It's not a household name, but an RTD for a small brand can really show it is a good way to get in front of mind.
Mm-hmm. Tip of the spear.
Yeah. So, or, this could go into, I know the Ace Hotel has an entire fridge of pre-made drinks. So if we had a small brand could think about a good way to get mind share or a good way to be able to get just exposure is buy an RTD. People might be more likely just to pick up that than actually an entire bottle.
Right, right. And I think one thing that I've seen, kind of talking about opportunities to get in front of people and to expand your presence in the market, one of the things that's bigger here in the United States is shared office spaces. The big one being WeWork, and WeWork was, I think, very smart in one respect, maybe ignoring some of the financial stuff they're currently going through, but they have beer taps. They have on-tap beer and cold brew coffee and infused fruit water, things that just make it nice to be there if you're a person who's essentially paying apartment-style rent for an office space. And if you're renting the office space, the trend now is to work longer hours, especially in the bigger cities. And so if you're at work until 7 p.m., maybe you want to, if you've got another half-hour work, you want to crack open that first drink of the day. You want to have that first beer of the evening while you're still at work. And especially in a city with public transit, that's feasible. So I think, like having more RTDs available would be a really good thing for some of these shared office spaces, especially having like little commissary areas where you can just pay a couple bucks and grab a can out of a cold case, which I think is expanding.
I love that idea.
Yeah,
I love that idea. I like to have a drink on the side when I'm working because I write, and I just find it's a nice lubricant to just have a drink, to just sit there a bit. Was it Ernest Hemingway that said, "Right, drunk, it's sober"? Is that him? I think it was.
Yes. Is there another disclaimer there, Kelly?
I'm just triggering all the disclaimers here. I'm so sorry.
I'm on my third RTD here, so I don't know if I have any more in me.
Cheers to that.
We've got a very similar thing in the UK. There's a company called Regus, and actually, funny enough, the business I work for, we rent a couple of offices from them. And it's the same thing every month. There's like a little bill comes through. It's with kitchen amenities, but in that is some little perks, like maybe I don't know. I don't work from one, but potentially RTDs. I know they have got beer and various other things, so it is a good idea, and it definitely is a market that should be going into that area too.
I suppose as well, if there's like, say, if there's like a restaurant space that just doesn't really have a bar, but it's just more about the food, and it's just got like a very simple setup, it's a nice way that they can offer cocktails to people without having to have all the setup to do it.
Sure, like the type of bar that would sell you a bucket of Coronas.
Yeah, it's more relaxed, it's easier.
I want my paint bucket full of like a 500 milliliter of sherry and some RTDs on the side and sit on the patio. Yeah.
One of the other things, because we were talking about all these different RTDs, and we've tasted the very nice Sipsmith.
What's the evaluation of the Sipsmith G&T?
Man on the street.
I quite like it. Again, refreshing. There's quite a lot of citrus, I think, on this one. But what I actually prefer about this one is, you said you like the 200 milliliter can, Kelly. I actually think this is 250. The Sipsmith, I think it's a lot better. A little bit more.
For man hands.
For man hands, I've got quite big hands. But it's like it's a tall can as well. I quite like that. I think that's probably about the right size to be putting in a cooler.
There's a little bit of elegance as well, I think, to a tool.
It is a bit of an elegance.
The
cup looks like
it's like a Collins glass.
Yeah,
it's the Collins glass of cans.
Yeah.
You can taste the gin, which I think is a great bonus.
Taste the gin, yeah. It's a 7.3.
See, that's sort of the
that's your starting hopping point.
The Bernie stamp of approval.
No, that's fine. I know it's like a weird thing. It's just anything above 5, really. Lone Wolf used to do one that was like 8%, I think.
That
was punchy though. Yeah. Can we try the yuzu one? It's a bit more bizarre. Well, just a bit more creative. Yeah, not bizarre at all.
Or it's a little more contemporary. than the classic of the standard gin and tonic.
Read it for us, Bernie.
So this is craft cocktails from Nat Boutique Gin Company. Yuzu Gin Collins, squeezed yuzu gin with jasmine lemonade. Ooh. Which is really inventive, right?
Jasmine. See, yeah. And so this is, I like where this is going, because we talked a little while ago about, these cocktails or RTDs that are supposed to be modeled off of a classic cocktail that you would build or a bartender would build in the glass. Now we're getting into the zone where the RTD is stealing some plays from the canned beverage space, like the non-alcoholic canned beverage space, by taking a flavor that's familiar and then twisting it in kind of a sexy way. Yuzu and jasmine are two of the sexiest words I've uttered in the past several hours.
That was my nickname in high school.
Yuzu jasmine.
Yuzu jasmine.
Oh, wait, no, that was my stripper name. I'm totally wrong. I get those confused.
So what do we think about the Yuzu jasmine? Is this advancing the conversation about what RTDs can do?
I think absolutely, because you can create anything, and I think companies like Boutique are so good for that. They're an incredibly creative company, like with the gins, and now bringing out the RTDs, because the gins are just crazy ideas, really good stuff. But then going into the RTDs, it was a case of, let's just with tonic, just with that. There's like all these different bits and pieces. What's the other one that I really like? There's a cherry cola one, but that's not that one. There's a different one. It's got like
strawberry
orange
and balsamico with the cream soda.
Yes, but it's something else with the cream. It's like orange blossom.
It's orange blossom cream soda.
Yeah,
it is orange.
Yeah, and it's just it's so inventive.
And I think this sort of thing, like you could get the gin and you can get some lemonade, but jasmine lemonade, that's a little harder to come by. Mm-hmm. And so now you get to a position with the canned cocktails and the RTDs, where actually you couldn't really very easily make this at home at all. The way that you have it is in this can, which is kind of moving on from what we were saying earlier about, well, you can't compare it to what you would make at home. You can't even make this at home. So,
I think they were really smart about this, because it is, for all the Americans listening, I have to say that the Boutique Gin Company is something that we can't get in the U.S., so on you guys over there. So they're using the gin that they're using in this is called the Squeeze Yuzu Gin, that they're mixing it with the jasmine lemonade. And lemonade can be somewhat coyingly sweet, and kind of, especially in a canned cocktail, can go very kind of citric acid or artificial. And I think they're really smart by using jasmine, so a floral note to kind of balance out the citrus note, and also the fact that it's drying. So it's perceived that it's going to be drier than sweeter on your palate, because the teas have got a drying quality, the jasmine's drying. So, sometimes it's hard when you look at something, you're like, oh, this is going to be really sweet. And then you taste it and it's not. And not saying it's bad, but now you've already gotten into this mindset that it is faulty in some way because of what your brain thought it was going to be.
Right. And so yesterday, I think one of the most successful RTDs at my table was a vodka Greyhound, which is kind of a grapefruity vodka drink. And I scored it very high. I'm almost positive that I scored it a gold. And the only feedback I gave is kind of on trend with what you were saying, Keli, because I was like, really the only way for me that this could be improved is with maybe a pinch of salt and 5% more acidity, so that people go back for another drink just that much faster and then go and get another one out of the fridge.
Responsibly.
I think it's evil advice. I mean, I almost feel half guilty making that advice, because I don't think that it'll overall have a good impact on humanity. But one of the things that people are sending this stuff to ADI for is to get feedback from people who not only have really trained palates, but people who've been behind a bar and know what consumers want and how to make money with that. Overall, I think we have to also acknowledge the fact that RTDs are probably the fastest growing category, and therefore are getting the attention of a lot of people who are willing to invest money with the expectation that they're going to make money back out of this. So I don't know. I think for me, one of the things I like to evaluate for is how, in the crushability spectrum, how fast would I crush this? And if there's something that the maker can do to decrease the amount of time between my sips, I think that's feedback that I'd love to give them.
And I think that with this Yuzu Collins that we're drinking now, that's the thing that it has. My glass has been empty for like 5 minutes, so I didn't have a lot. But
this is quite. You're right. It's quite dry. It's like I can feel it in my lips. It's I need to drink another bit. It's very innovative. I love the fact that they've gone somewhere completely different with it, with a bit of yuzu. And that the gin's fantastic but
I also think with this one, this is kind of where I see the RTD category going. This is the direction of what we're going to start to see, much more of the craft. So it's the craft of the gin, it's the craft of how you're doing it, but it's also the packaging. Between this and the Sipsmith, I might be biased, but between this and the Sipsmith, I think these are eye-catching. If you were on a wall full of RTDs, this is the where my eye would land on, and my eye would continue to land on, is something that is, because it looks like part of the bottle. So if I wanted to then see the bottle in the store, I'm like, oh yeah, I had that RTD. I can catch it. I'm going to take it home, put it in my basket, and buy it.
And you know what I love actually about the 4 cans that we have on the table next to each other? They're all very different. The long drink, the pink long drink looks like a beer. It looks like a affordable, we'll call it, beer. The Club Martini, it looks almost like an energy drink type of thing. It's kind of got this very club-like, very contemporary packaging. It's got a color gradient on it.
It's got a nice 80s vibe as
well.
Yeah,
for sure.
I do quite like
like
yeah. I mean, I've got Donna Summers in my head. I don't know about you.
Now, the Sipsmith, like the can, it kind of reminds me, I mean, minus the logo with the company branding, it reminds me almost like some of the European sparkling waters that you'll find can. The colors are very much in that direction. And then the Yuzu Collins looks like a can of craft beer because, you know that anybody who's walked into a store that sells craft beer sees the proliferation of this very bright, very eye-catching artwork. So I think right here we have a really cool core sample of a bunch of RTDs that are using different associations to kind of pitch what they're selling to people, which I really like.
The other thing I find really good is that, I mean, quite a lot of the ones we've tried this week have had their own takes on such like ginger beer or their own cola. So they've then gone and made the ginger beer, they've made the cola. So that's not something you're going to be able to try anywhere else. It's not like, I can throw a boutique gin together with a Schweppes tonic. Mm-hmm. But having them give their own tonic, their own ginger beer, their own any other iteration is really cool because they've then gone and they've made another product to make specially for that.
I think the thing is as well, when it's suddenly a unique product, it's like more desirable because it's not the case you're choosing between those of the same thing. There's something it's like, well, that's that one thing. I want to try that one thing.
You can't get their ginger beer, their cola elsewhere because it's not for sale. It's actually only for sale in that RTD.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I was going to say something quite controversial.
Please, David.
It's not all about gin. There are other I know.
Yeah, no.
I'm eyeing.
I think David's been dry for a while, so.
Okay, so
I think the
rum?
The rum.
Yeah.
Rum punch.
The rum.
All right, we'll give it a little audio verite.
I love the idea that people are going to be listening to this at home and just like opening a can every time. Oh, I bet.
This is a little ASMR.
I'm also quite partial to a RTD mule. I'm sure you are too, Bernie.
Yes. Yes. I won't talk about some of the ones that I tried.
You're such a gentleman, man on the street.
Man on the street.
Oh yeah, this was on my table yesterday.
Ooh.
What do we think?
Well, first of all, I must say, I am a very big fan of this. Even at a little temperature of the room, as opposed to the ice cold. One of the things that I love this, and it does, best served chilled. The thing that I really like about this is it is not a sparkling cocktail. It's not supposed to be a sparkling cocktail. It does come in a can. We had a lot of discussion at our table about this. Should we market? I'm like, no, it's supposed to be a flat drink. And that's, again, the perception of the consumer opening a can. Like you try to open it up to get the noise. And it's there because it has to, because it's canned, it's under pressure. But the drink is not to be carbonated. I don't think that takes away from it at all.
No,
definitely not. I mean, this is quite strong, so this is 9%. But I think
Bernie approved.
Bernie approved. But it's rum punch, passion fruit, pineapple, orange, coconut. I think
it's lovely.
Oh yeah.
Arguably, really you can taste all of that in there. Yeah. I think.
I mean, it's a party in my glass, is what it is.
It's really nice. It is really nice.
I think the fact, going back to the can pressurization and then the carbonation, I think the fact that cold brew coffee has been so popular in the U.S. recently has saved that a little bit. They kind of led that non-carbonated canned beverage explosion. So I think people are going to be less alarmed when they open a can these days, and it doesn't give the carbonation little spritz there. So
it depends on how much you know the cocktail as well. I mean, if you know what a rum punch would be, then there's not going to be carbonation. But some consumers, myself, may not know that it's not to have carbonation. It's not a problem, don't get me wrong, lovely cocktail, but it could get lost in the translation of the can, I think.
I could see Keli wanting a sparkling martini.
And here I thought we were friends. Can I have a martini highball, please?
So I think we've had a really, really fun kind of core sample of what's available on the RTD market. This has been really educational for me, especially because I am not partial to RTDs. I tend to rate them, I think, a little bit more militantly than some other folks. I'm very sensitive to aspartame, like artificial sugars and artificial flavors, because what I do on a weekly basis is deal with like natural flavor extracts. It's very easy for me to pull out when something is not natural, and to me, that's a personal turnoff. But I do think it's probably the most fun category that we're seeing on the rise. Do we want to offer any kind of closing remarks as we wrap up here? Maybe, advice for home consumers or projections on where we think this is headed?
It's going up. That's where I reckon it's going.
I think it is. I think it's kind of on the cusp, because it's sort of gone from doing things that already were there to starting to do new things. So that's just opened such a huge avenue. Like the possibilities are endless. So I'm quite interested to see where it's going in the next couple of years, actually.
I think my main tip is keep them nice and cold. I think certainly anything that's carbonated, like the bubbles are just so much crisper when it's really nice and cold. And really, I drink it straight from the can as well. Get that cool and refreshing. There you go.
I mean, I think what we're finding, especially if you're coming from more of a, especially in the United States, because the RTD has taken over in Australia. I mean, for Beam Suntory, 70% of most of our spirits are in RTDs. That's how they're being consumed. UK, as we've seen in the last few years, have definitely boomed. You go to any grocery store and there's just overtaking the beer. But for in the US, we're not seeing it as much, mostly because the taxation on higher proof, people don't want to pay the money because they think that they're less proof, they're going to get gypped. But one of the things that I like to think about is we're finding that millennials, there's all these things that millennials aren't drinking as much. Yes, maybe there are some states that legalize certain things that maybe people don't need to drink to get relax, or the fact that they're very health conscious. But what we're finding is millennials are drinking as much. They're just drinking differently. We cannot count them in bars and restaurants like some other generations. They're drinking on the go. They're doing activities. They're getting out. They're hiking. They're picnicking. They're spending time doing things that weren't traditionally something that had food and drinks. And this is where you're seeing an amazing opportunity for the RTD and the ready-to-drink category.
Right. And unlike, say you were on a picnic, unlike bringing a bottle of gin and, maybe some mixers with it, if you bring a 6-pack of RTDs with branding on it, anytime anyone looks at that, you're getting market impact. You're getting your brand out there, which I think is a great opportunity. For me, the one thing I have to say to wrap this up is, as probably the most skeptical of the RTD category at this table, I think the takeaway that I've had from this conversation, the little aha moment for me, is that the RTD category is not divorced from craft. In fact, I think the RTD category is actually really reliant on craft. And so I think that's the light bulb moment for me, is seeing this creativity going on and seeing that it's not necessarily being driven from the top down. It's actually being driven by the really high quality things that are going on at these craft distilleries and craft bars. Otherwise, I don't think we would have the Yuzu Gin Collins. So, anybody else have anything to say before we sign off here and send our listeners off to grab a 6-pack of something?
Drink responsibly.
I was just about to
but
say
enjoy
that.
it.
If we'd have done that in tandem, that would have been great.
Cheers, everybody.
Thanks.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Thank you.